Good to be with you. I'm Katie Turk. Quote, insurmountable difficulties. Donald Trump's lawyers say he cannot come up with the money needed for his almost $500 million civil fraud bond. Despite approaching roughly 30 companies asking for help, they've all said no. The deadline to post the bond is next week. And if he fails to do so, New York Attorney General Letitia James can start seizing his assets. That is, unless a judge steps in. Joining us now, NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard and former Brooklyn prosecutor here in New York and MSNBC legal analyst Charles Coleman. So, Vaughn, this money stuff, you and I have been talking about it, and clearly it is a major problem. Bring us up to speed.
Right. This is an issue here. Well, you know, you're looking at him campaigning in Ohio over the weekend. Of course, the state of Arizona continues to be a focus point for their political operation. Donald Trump and his family and the family business is wholly focused on the fact that they've got to somehow come up over the next 7 days with more than $450 million, even whether it be in cash or whether it be in the form of an appeal bond. But what this motion here from Donald Trump's lawyer this morning to the appellate court in New York seeks to do is put a stay on him having to execute on paying and putting forward that appeal bond for the damages. The difficult reality is that Donald Trump is having to come to terms with the fact that they've already gone to 30 different surety bond companies seeking help. And according to Donald Trump's own lawyer, none of them have been able to come through. And coming up with $93 million bond was tough enough for the E. Jean Carroll damages suit. But this is a whole nother level here. And you're then getting potentially to the conversation of selling a stake in the Trump organization or finding somebody to invest and put up the cash on behalf of Donald Trump. But as Trump's own attorney suggested, there's nobody in the United States of America who has just $500 million in equity, cash, laying on their kitchen table, ready to turn over and put forward to help out Donald Trump. And so this is a difficult reality at a time where his campaign would love to focus on the political. But for him, he's focused on the future of not only his own family company, but also his own finances.
Not to mention what national security analysts and those in the intelligence community would say is a potentially dangerous thing to have somebody, any individual or foreign entity or whatever, post bond for Donald Trump as he's running for president. Vaughn?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. I mean, you're coming down to questions of whether he seeks to have support from somebody overseas, a foreign entity. There's a lot of question marks that, frankly, Trump, his campaign, his legal team have not provided clear insight to. And so, I mean, when you're coming down to the fact that on Monday, Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, said that she will begin going through the process through the courts to begin actually seizing his assets, you're talking about within 7 days, Donald Trump potentially losing major properties in Manhattan. So there's a lot at stake for him. And undoubtedly, if they've already gone to 30 surety companies at this point, they are doing everything possible to somehow come up with this appeal bond or this cash. And for Donald Trump and his company, this is a matter of whatever it takes at this point.
Charles, in order to get this bond, what these companies, the Trump team says these companies are asking for is either cash from Donald Trump or securities. They don't want real estate. Why might they not want real estate?
Well, part of the reason for that, Katie, is because when you're talking about real estate, you don't know what the mortgages on those properties are or what's owed on those properties. So creating a valuation system that's going to allow them to properly assess what those properties are worth is very complicated, and it's a complex process. So they want stuff that they know is very marketable and immediately something that they can liquidate if they need to. So ultimately what we're talking about is Donald Trump needing to find more or less $500 million, if not closer to $1 billion, in order to satisfy this bond so that he can move forward with his appeal. And that doesn't look like it's going to happen. So unless this judge decides to step in and somehow lower the bond, which would be pretty much outside of the guidelines in New York State, or do something else like grant him an additional stay to get the time, Letitia James is going to be able to move forward in terms of trying to seize his assets, because you're talking about a gargantuan amount of money that's necessary. And as you've already said, these surety companies are not taking real property in lieu of actual hard cash.
So correct me or tell me what's going on. He has to go to Judge Engoron directly. Judge Engoron has been pretty hard line on Donald Trump, really not budging a lot. He's the one who initially, or the one who's set this judgment against Trump. He's the one who's asking for the bond. What's the likelihood that he might wiggle?
not very likely. And I think if you recall, Katie, we talked a little while ago about the genius and brilliance of Judge Engoron when he allowed Donald Trump to testify and sort of go off the rails. What I mean when I talk about that is that at this point, Donald Trump has literally made his bed and now has to lie in it. And he did that by his own making and of his own doing during court, literally out of his own mouth. And I think that the trouble that he walked himself into throughout the course of the trial is now coming back to bite him because he is not able to make any sort of persuasive argument in front of the very judge that issued this judgment and put this in a court order to now go back on what he ultimately decided. And so I don't see it as being very likely because you're talking about a judge who is obviously extremely familiar with the facts, was literally there for every moment of the trial, and is the person who made the finding and the decision. So he has literally no incentive to change his mind from what it is that he already decided, given that when he decided it the first time, he had all the information that he has now, and there's really nothing new that's come to pass such that it would make him change his mind. We'll
see. I mean, Donald Trump was on camera in one of his depositions last year saying that he had $400 million in cash on hand. It does definitely cut against that claim that he made only last year. This is the Trump campaign's response. This is from Stephen Chung. I want to read it. This is a motion to stay the unjust, unconstitutional, un-American judgment from New York Judge Engoron in a political witch hunt brought by a corrupt attorney general. A bond of this size would be an abuse of the law, contradict bedrock principles of our republic, and fundamentally undermine the rule of law in New York. President Trump will continue fighting and beating all of these crooked blah, 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 et cetera, I should say. If A.G. James comes out and tries to seize assets, Charles, how does that work?
It's a long process. It basically is essentially what would happen if you were trying to collect something from another individual. And so there's going to be an assessment of his actual properties, of their values, and then basically trying to put liens on them and at a minimum prevent him from being able to do anything with them. And so it's going to be a very difficult process. We're obviously focusing on his real property assets that he has, but any sort of liquid Letitia James will be looking to take advantage of. And so there will be an assessment of priority around the assets that he has and then looking to seize them vis-a-vis court enforcement and ultimately the sheriff's office in the state of New York.
This is a really big deal. And again, Chubb was the one that came to his aid for the E. Jean Carroll judgment, which was just over or just about $100 million. We will see what happens with this. Again, 7 days or so to go before he has to post that bond. Charles Coleman, thank you very much.